Welcome to the Filmtrepreneur podcast, episode number 44. Your potential is endless. Go do what you were created to do. Anonymous.
This is the Filmtrepreneur podcast, where we teach you the top strategies, tactics, and growth hacks that every indie filmmaker needs to know to make money with their films. We are the podcast that puts the business back into show business. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Filmtrepreneur podcast. I am your quarantined and humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Rise of the Filmtrepreneur, how to turn your independent film into a profitable business. It's harder today than ever before for independent filmmakers to make money with their films. From predatory film distributors ripping them off to huckster film aggregators who prey upon them, the odds are stacked against the indie filmmaker. The old distribution model of making money with your film is broken, and there needs to be a change. The future of independent filmmaking is the entrepreneurial filmmaker or the filmtrepreneur. In Rise of the Filmtrepreneur, I break down how to actually make money with your film projects and show you how to turn your indie film into a profitable business. With case studies examining successes and failures, this book shows you the step-by-step method to turn your passion into a profitable career. If you're making a feature film, series, or any other kind of video content, the Filmtrepreneur method will set you up for success. The book is available in paperback, ebook, and of course, audiobook. If you want to order it, just head over to www.filmbizbook.com. That's filmbizbook.com. Before we get started, guys, I set up a special link to help people affected by the coronavirus, and you can donate to Feed America. There is a lot of people in need out there, and Feed America is a great organization, and they're helping millions of people on a daily basis, and they also need your help. If you want to donate even $5, $10, it goes a long way. Head over to indiefilmhustle.com/help. Now, today on the show, we have writer, director, podcaster, blogger, Noam Kroll. And I wanted to get Noam on because his new movie, Shadows on the Road, is hitting iTunes. And the movie cost about $12,000 to make, and he did it in a very unorthodox way. He has some amazing tactics that he used, as well as marketing ideas and marketing strategies to get it on iTunes, how he launches it, how he went out and shot it with pretty much a skeleton crew, and it looks stunning. He shot it with Blackmagic cameras, and I just wanted to kind of dig into his head on how he did it, what he's doing with it, how he's getting it out there, and his entire process, because, you know, $12,000 feature is much more accessible than trying to raise $50,000 or $100,000 for a feature film. And if you can hopefully learn something from Noam today on the show that can help you get your $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 feature film off the ground and get it out there, all the better. So that's one of the main reasons I want to know him on. The other one is he's just a cool dude, man. He's a really, really cool guy, and he does really good work on his podcast and his blog, which we'll get links, all that stuff after the show. But without any further ado, let's get into it. Please enjoy my conversation with Noam Kroll. I'd like to welcome to the show Noam Kroll, man. Thank you so much for being on the show, brother.
Thank you, Alex. I'm excited to be here in video as well. So this is great.
Video and audio. So for all of you listening, you can also watch the video on IFH TV through the new IFH TV video podcast. But enough about that. So I had the pleasure of being on Noam's amazing podcast a few months, 6 months ago, something like that?
Something like that, yeah, 5-6 months ago.
Right, and it was a great experience, and he's an LA guy like me, so it's always nice to connect with other guys in town, and I wanted to have him on the show because he has a new movie, and how he made that movie is a very interesting story, so I wanted to talk about that. But first and foremost, Noam, how did you get into this ridiculous business we call the film industry?
Well, I think I always try to go back, as many people do, to like when you got in psychologically and
Sure.
when did I actually get in. So psychologically, it's probably like you and like a lot of people, it was just always something that I did. Like as a kid, I was shooting movies and taking like all my school projects were taking my camcorder and making, you know, ridiculously offensive videos for my school projects and all of that.
I did those too.
Exactly. And that was, you know, I think just getting a bit of a rush from like, oh, this is is something I like doing. It's fun, it's creative, and it entertains people. That kind of was the bug, but I really didn't realize it just never, I grew up in Toronto, and yes, there's a film industry there, but it's not like LA where like you throw a stone and you hit like a producer, an actor, whatever. It still seems like this very like foreign thing. So I didn't really, it never like crossed my mind that I could actually make a living doing it. And I was also, I always knew I was going to make films. I thought it'd be more of a passion thing on the side. And I went to school, like I studied psychology. While I was in university, a friend of mine started a little production company just doing like local commercials, and he brought me into it. And I was like essentially freelancing, doing commercials and all of that. While I was doing short films and all this other stuff, and like studying something totally unrelated in school. And once I graduated, I just said, you know what, I'm going to this is really what I want to do. I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to rent an apartment that I literally don't know how I'm going to pay for at the end of this month. I'm going to go on Craigslist and find whatever freelance job will pay me, $200 to go and shoot some crappy commercial for something that nobody's ever going to see. And I'm not above anything. I'm just starting, and I just want to see if this is possible. And essentially, I just put one foot in front of the other and scaled that up and turned it into more of a professional system where I'm also still to this day balancing making my own films and making commercial content, but not scouring the internet for work, and having proper marketing systems in place, and working with, clients I really want to work with and projects I want to work with, and making the films I want to make. So it's still a learning process, but that was kind of the inciting incident, to use some screenwriting lingo. If that answers your question, hopefully.
Sure. And then, you just finished doing a new movie, which is amazing, called Shadows on the Road. How did that come to be? And tell us a little bit about how you made that, movie. It's a unique story.
Yeah. So it was, I'd made another feature. I call it a feature length film and not a feature film because I never released it. But when I was like 25, 26, I wanted to make a feature, and I did this micro budget film, which in many ways I'm very proud of, but I didn't really know what I was doing yet. Every movie you probably say that after you're done with it. But in this case, like I really hadn't gone to film school. I learned everything on that movie. And at the same time, I was sort of soured from the experience, in the sense that like it wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. I didn't know how to market it. I didn't understand film festivals. I didn't even submit to most film festivals. Like it was just so daunting. And I took at the same time I was moving to LA, and I had to make money because I didn't know a single person here. And so like 4 or 5 years of my life were basically dedicated to like, I got to move to a new country. I'm from Toronto. How do I do that? How do I keep making a living doing that? And I knew at some point I'd get back to making a feature. But it wasn't until like 2 years ago that I finally said, you know what? I've been thinking about this for a while. I've been writing stuff that needs bigger budgets that I'm excited about, but like I just can't get it done. Like, what can I do right now? And this was a total experiment where I went with my wife. She co-wrote it with me, and we were having lunch, and we were just saying, what can we do literally in like 2 weeks? What can we shoot a month from now that we can write right now, not put pressure on it to be this like perfect thing we're going to spend 2 years developing? Like, just let it be imperfect and let it be an experience, and like let some magic happen within that. And that's what we did. Wrote a concept literally like over lunch based on a theme. The film centers around a girl who is essentially a victim of abuse. And those details of that are revealed throughout the course of the film. So I don't want to get too much into that for anyone that might watch it, but it essentially deals with that theme. And it's, something that is very obviously right now, very relevant. And when we wrote, and all this stuff happening with like Me Too or whatever wasn't happening, but it was still clearly like in the air that like there was a lot of these stories floating around, and we were trying to figure out like how do we package that theme into a format that we can shoot for what ended up being like $12,000. And I thought it was going to be even less, but that was like us going over budget was like $12,000. So how do we do that in, like a week and a half with no money and like a 2-3 person crew? And we backed our creative creative idea into those parameters. So we came up with a structure for the story, the movie, the logistics, everything that would be feasible within our own means, which is, what everybody preaches. And it, for the most part, it worked. There were some rules I broke that definitely got us into trouble and caused me a ton of stress and pain throughout the process. But it got done in the end, and we released it. And, I'm sure over the course of the conversation and, ask me if there's any specifics you want me to get into, but there's a lot of crazy stories in both production and post, that I'm happy to dive into if that's where you want to go.
No, absolutely. So, all right. So first of all, was this a SAG project?
It was SAG. Yeah, it was ultra low budget, I'm sure you know, but for listeners, that's like now they also have new media, which you can, sometimes people prefer that, but yeah, ultra low budget. So you're paying your actors like $125 a day. If they have an agent, it's like $135, $137.
Yeah. So you're paying the agent the $10 because God knows they need it. It's just like, it's so ridiculous. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it was SAG, and it was only SAG because part of the way that we can do it so quickly was it had to be written around people we knew. So there's two different actresses I'd worked with before, both really good. One was full SAG. She's been in movies that have gone to like South by Southwest, and she's also a singer. So she's kind of in the, she has a lot of stuff going on, and she's a full member, and it was easier to just deal with SAG and hire her than it would have been to try to recast the whole, or like cast the whole thing from scratch and find someone as good as her. It was, I don't, honestly, I don't love working with SAG. I'm doing it right now. It's not the most fun thing to do, but it's a necessary evil, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yes. Yes. Unfortunately, sometimes. Yes. Yes, it is. No question about it.
Did your film, I know, I'll let you get back if you have a follow up, but did you do Meg with SAG as well? Or?
Yeah. It was the same thing. SAG low.
Okay.
Ultra low budget.
Ultra low.
Yeah, cool. Kind of thing. So yeah, because we had a great cast. We were very blessed to have a really great, amazing cast. We were all very seasoned actors.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Without question. So, all right. So you gather this thing together, and you get the actors. You're like, okay, I'm going to go shoot this thing. I'm assuming the money came out of your own pocket.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So you guys put your money where your mouth is, which is good. And then, how did you gather the crew, and what made you decide what crew members were absolutely necessary for the process?
Well, that's a great question, and that kind of led to like the very first issue that I had on set was I'm so used to doing so much myself. I've shot short films where I've been a one-man crew, and I quickly realized on the feature, just because I can do that doesn't mean I should, or that I'm going to be able to sustain that over a feature. Even if it's a 7-day, 10-day, 12-day feature, it's a lot more than one day when you're doing it yourself, and you can relax, or 2 days or whatever on a short film. So originally it was supposed to be myself, my wife who wrote it and was producing. She was going to be on set with us. Our sound recordist, Scott, who was there every day. And on some days, only some days when we needed like special effects, makeup, and makeup artists. And more or less that was it. Like it was literally like 3 of us. And I got to day 1 and I started shooting. And just by the end of the day, I realized I needed to bring on someone to shoot, because I couldn't. It was all handheld. I couldn't physically deal at the end of the 12-hour, 10-hour day, whatever it was, the first day, with like having this camera on my shoulder, trying to focus on the story, the actors, like not having any AC, any grip, anyone else, like a PA even, to just like take the camera in between takes. Like didn't have any of that. So I called a friend of mine who'd shot some low budget stuff with me before. I said, can I call in a favor? I don't have a lot of money. I'll throw you few bucks, whatever I can afford. Do you want to do a feature? I knew he wanted to do narrative. He came on board. So we ended up being, a team on our biggest day of like maybe 4 instead of 3 or whatever that came out to be. And that was it. And the next film, I by the way, I don't advise that, because I'm making, as you know, another feature right now. And I think for certain films you can do that, and that's probably what you should do. But you have to know if it's right for the film, and that film, it worked for, but it was a struggle. It wasn't, I'm not going to paint a picture that like it was, yeah, you could make a movie with 3 people and it's easy. It's not easy, as you know. I mean, it's hard. And under certain circumstances, it's really hard and maybe not even a good idea. So on my next film, I mean, we're still going to be a small crew, but we're going to have enough people there that at least the day-to-day operations are moving. Me, wanting to blow my brains out at the end of every shooting day.
No, I agree with you 100%. My first film, I was the DP on, and I was a shooter and that, and then I was like, I don't want to do that again. My back, I hurt myself. There was physical damage to me, like just carrying that black magic rig on my shoulder. And it was like all this kind of, and I was out of shape. I was just out of shape. So then on the second film, I was able to do it, and I brought in my trusty DP, Austin, and he did a great job. But the thing I think everyone listening should really understand is that you said something very, very interesting. The parameters. Is it right for the story? Is it correct for the story? So both those movies, both my movies and your movies, you kind of try to build the crew. Is this right for this film? Is this camera the right camera for this film? Is it, do I need 30 people on set? Can I get away with 3 people? And will it do the story justice? If you're trying to do a huge action movie with 3 people, that's not going to work.
Exactly. And even within the micro budget, I think if I can add to that, I think it's, so my philosophy has always been there's these rules you have to follow as a micro budget filmmaker. But if you follow every single rule, you're going to wind up with the same movie that everybody else is making. And it may not be that great. It may be great. And you can figure out some brilliant idea that works within those confines. But my philosophy has always been like, pick 1 or 2 rules that you're willing to break. And if it means extra work or extra sweat equity or money or whatever it takes, like break that rule to make it, if it's going to really count and if it's going to really make it special. So on this one, I broke the location rule of like, everyone says shoot in 1 location or shoot in 2 or 3 locations. Like every single day we shot in a different location, none of which we had permits for.
What?
And exactly. And it was literally the most stressful experience of my life. And I've had some pretty stressful experiences in my life. And it was so insane to try to pull that off. And in the end, I mean, I could look at it and say, okay, I'm on one hand, I'm very happy because we had, we shot in all these different locations. I feel like it added a lot of production value. And that was the goal from the beginning.
Sure.
Like, let's not just put this all in like one room, although that could be an amazing movie if it's written that way. But it's a road movie. It's an experience. Let's like show the landscape. Let's drive up to the desert. Like, let's just every day, go somewhere else. And it was really that like compounded with all the other craziness. Like we had a van that literally broke down every day and that my DP, when he was supposed to be filling it up with gas, cause he was driving it, he put the gas in like the engine coolant tank or the water tank or something. So we like I was driving just to go on a bit of a tangent. Like I'm driving to set one day, which is the Google Maps pin that I dropped in the middle of Palmdale that I sent everybody at like 3 a.m. the night before.
Sure.
And I just see the van. We rented this like hippie VW, like hippie van. And I see it pulled over on the highway and I'm like, oh God, that's not our van, is it? I see the DP like emptying, like opening up this thing and gas coming out of the van on the ground. And we're already like late to be shooting. And like, that was just like one day, so every day was that basically. So it was crazy.
But for me, like, I'll tell you though, like, that thing you were saying that you made you so nervous and stressful, I found exhilarating. Like,
yes.
And maybe that's because I've got a few more years on you that I just found like, I don't care. As you get older, you give less of a crap. Yeah. I mean, you just truly give less of a crap as you get older. So I was just like super excited, just like, I don't have permission. This is awesome.
Yeah. Well, no. And I hear you. And I'm normally like that. And I was like that for the first couple of days, but I think part of it was like, we got kicked out of 3 different locations. I think all within like the first 2 days of shooting. And your
actors are like, oh God.
Exactly. So my anxiety was less about like, I've been kicked out of shooting places before. Sure. And And it's usually, as you know, it's like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. It's like, it's not that big of a deal. But at the same time, what I was getting anxious about is like, okay, I'm paying everybody for these days. There's not a lot of people. The actors only have a little window to do this. If we don't get these scenes that are really important for the movie, like I'm getting anxiety that like, can we even like make this movie? Can we put together one of the most important like scenes in the first act is when the two main characters meet each other, and we were shooting it on Venice Beach. And I had like, at least 3 hours, 4 hours mentally blocked off for that scene. Within 5 minutes of shooting it, the security guard came up and I like begged him, like, can we just have literally 5 minutes? And on the fly, we had to think like, okay, what do we rewrite now? How do we rework this? So
you were trying to shoot on Venice Beach.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, dude, you're rolling hard, man. That's a tough place to shoot.
Oh yeah. Especially with like, we had like a full, you have a full black magic rig. Yeah. Full rig and like audio, which is really what gives it away. You have someone with like a giant boom pole and all that. And it was just, it was a risk I was willing to take. And I took it and we got the shots we needed. But yeah, the scenes that should have been like 4-hour scenes, we had to all of a sudden like turn a dialogue scene into like a visual exchange that's going to happen over 5 minutes of shooting time. It was having to deal with that stuff that was getting stressful. But yeah, I mean, there were definitely good days too. It wasn't all crazy, but it took its toll for sure on me and the crew, I'm sure.
So you shot the whole thing in 12 days, right?
Yes. So it was 12 days. And I think we did like 2 or 3 pickup days, 2 of which like I just cut out of the movie. So they were total wasted days. Nice. And one of which was basically me driving around by myself with a camera, like getting
B-roll and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you please tell the audience, because I think this is something that directors and filmmakers don't really realize, especially us lazy filmmakers and out of shape filmmakers, that this is a physical game to do this. This is not Peter Jackson shooting Lord of the Rings with a recliner, a lazy boy on set, like he did. Literally had a lazy boy on set, and they would like PAs would carry the lazy boy from place to place, and he would just sit down and go to Video Village. That's not this. So a lot of filmmakers don't understand that when they go down this road, how physically grueling it's going to be. Can you please just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I could add a lot to that conversation because it was in this film in particular. I agree with that 100%. And that's true of, I think, like every film on this scale I've ever worked on. But this one in particular was so grueling that it literally took me the better part of a year to physically recover. I got sick. I literally developed like, I was sick on and off for 6 months. I was like going to the doctor. My skin was messed up. I was going to the dermatologist. We're shooting in like freezing cold weather with no sleep all day. I was going to like these like sweat, like in Hollywood, they have like these
sweat lodges
shop.
Sweat lodges
with my wife and like sweating like a pig. And I'm like, I'm getting better. And then the next day I'm like vomiting. Like literally my body, my immune system was completely destroyed. I was more sick than I've ever been in my life. I'm actually going to do an article at some point on my website about like just the toll it took. And I couldn't write it until now because honestly it was like psychologically damaging. And I was like, how could I ever do this again? And that's why on the next film, I've put all of these measures in place because I know how hard it is, putting so much more time into prep, putting so much more time into just making sure that the team that's on board is going to be able to make it, it's still going to be really hard. I don't doubt that. But like just some of the contingencies I can put in place to like not get to that point. Like it was no joke. Like if I did another film like that, I literally think it would actually kill me. Like it's
I think you've absolutely scared the hell out of the audience. you've told like, and I had hives and my arm literally fell off. I had to attach it again. It's like,
I'm not joking. It wasn't that far off. And I don't mean to say everything's going to be like that, but it literally, in my case on this film, it was, and I'll blame myself for the way it was scheduled, the lack of pre-production. The pre-production was the main thing because like there were days where, because it was all guerrilla, I had an idea, maybe we're going to shoot somewhere I found on Google Maps, and I drive there the day before to scout it. And now there's construction there. And then we have to shoot later that night. And then it's 3 a.m. and I just got home. I don't know where we're filming the next day. And like, I'm up all night trying to put a call sheet together because there's no AD. So it's just like, if you don't want to, destroy yourself making a film, I think the key is just know what you cannot handle, at least try to predict that. And then if it's money well spent, like we all want to do things as cheaply as possible, and that's great. But like in retrospect, like I would have way rather put a couple of $1,000 on a credit card and had 1 or 2 more people involved that could have lightened the load a little bit. So it's not always necessary, but again, this wasn't a film where we're shooting it in one house with 2 actors having a conversation. If it was that, then that's, a piece of cake in physically maybe,
right.
But it wasn't that.
I'll tell you what, and this will be the last thing we'll do to scare the hell out of everybody listening. On my first film, This Is Meg, I had this rig that I built out to carry this. It was a ridiculously big rig, for the camera. I shot the 2.5K, Blackmagic cinema camera. So I'm carrying this rig, right? And then afterwards I develop a trigger finger on my hand because I was gripping it the wrong way. I just had surgery. This is 2.5 years later. I had surgery on my hand. Like, oh my God, like literally a month ago. So like I can't
from that same. It just never went and went. Is it better now or? Is
no. The trigger's gone, but now I'm in therapy. Yeah. I'm in like physical therapy, trying to fix my finger to kind of close. I have perfect grip. I can grab. I can do everything. But like if I go I close too much, it hurts because I'm still healing. I'm literally like 4 or 5 weeks out of the surgery, but I literally had surgery because of that. So that's why the second movie I was like, Austin, just you carry the camera. I can't. I'm not. Exactly. I'm not. Well,
because you live and learn. Exactly. Yeah. And I think people are so gung ho to just say, and I'm of this camp. Like I preach this on my blog and everything every week. But it's like just take a punk rock attitude. Just make the movie. Do whatever you have to do to make the movie. Like no one's going to make it for you, and all of that's true. But at the same time, I think you have to think of it as like a long term career in the sense like you're going to make a lot of movies, and don't. Do something that is going to like don't mess up your back so badly that like you can't make another movie for another 2 years or whatever it may be. Like you have to pace yourself. But anyway, I mean, I hopefully nobody's too freaked out. I do want to reiterate that a lot of it was so much just a personal like just choices I shouldn't have made that I did make. Exactly. But I think there's a version of that film that could have happened where it would have been a little bit smoother sailing.
Yeah. We're not trying to scare everybody listening. I mean, but it is something to be said that a lot of times filmmakers. I know a lot of them. I was one of them. I'm trying to get back into better shape. As you get older, it gets harder and harder. But you're out of shape a lot of times, because we're watching movies all day on the couch. We're vegging on Netflix, or we're writing a screenplay all day, or something like that. It's not very physically, strenuous. So then, when you go out and like, hey, yeah, and your mind thinks you're 20. But your body's like, no, not anymore. And you're still really out of shape. And it really does take a toll on you, especially when you're trying to do these kind of run and gun indie, I'm going to go steal shots, kind of mentality. It happened to me on the first one. Like I had to do on Meg, I literally had to do a trek up to the Hollywood side. So me and the 2 actors, that my main actress and a friend, I did the hike. I did the hike like 8 years earlier.
Yeah, I know that hike. And there's like the horse crap all over the trail.
Right. And then there's that steep, like it's a steep, like walk up, like towards the end.
It's like a 40-minute hike, basically.
40. You're a marathon runner, sir. It took me much longer than that. But I'm carrying the gear with me. And I'm just like, you could literally see shots in the movie where I'm like, all right, let's do a shot here. And you can see the camera just like, because it's just me with the camera. I'm like, I'm trying to hold it together. I had to literally stabilize some of it in post because.
Oh my God!
But
you know what? Well, I was sorry to interrupt, but I was going to say physically 100%. I mean, it's so taxing, but I think even psychologically when you're done, and this probably applies to larger scale films as well, but
Sure.
your mind is so hyper focused on this one thing for even if it's like a 5-day shoot, a 10-day shoot, whatever it is, like that's all you're living and breathing. Every question you're asked is like, where should the camera go? Where should this go? And you're so, it's a great energy and it's positive and you're in great spirits, but there's also this vacuum when it's over where like you're physically depleted, you're mentally, your brain is still I don't know if everyone feels like this, but like I feel like my brain is like still on overdrive, and the mistakes or the things that you didn't get are starting to set in, and the reality of like the post-production mountain you have to climb is setting in. So there's this tough period for me, at least, like in between finishing a crazy shoot like that and then actually shooting the material that is like almost as hard as shooting the movie. It's just like getting through the mental barrier of like, okay, let's gather, like recharge the batteries right now, take maybe a couple of weeks away or whatever, and then get back into it. And especially when it's like someone like yourself or myself, where you're editing your own movie and you're coloring your own movie and you're doing all like, I mean, it's a lot to take on. So you gotta, pace yourself. That's my only advice, is like, just pace yourself and know it'll be hard. And if you know it's going to be hard, it's not as bad. If you think it's going to be easy, then everything is like, oh my God, this is a problem now. When you know it's going to be a problem, then at least you're prepared. At least that's how I see it.
What I find funny is that this conversation is now turned into a therapy session for indie filmmakers. Like, I love it. I love that. It's just like all of a sudden I'm like, and then I had this thing happen to me. Like, it's great. I love it. I love it because I feel exactly the way you do. And everyone listening, just bear with us because I think this needs to be said. When you're done with a shoot, I always feel like we're like carnies, like we're carnival folk. So you gather this group of unique, interesting people, because generally there always are, interesting people to make this thing. And you do this intense thing, especially in the micro budget, where it's intense and fast. And it's not like you're sitting on a movie for 6 months like these big blockbusters. Like, you are building this family, but you do it so quickly. It's like going to war almost. And then when you're done, I get to at least go back, and you get to go back to go into post. So then we're still kind of in it, but you miss that relationship you just built. And then when the post is over, now you're just like, oh, I want to go back. Like shooting Ego and Desire at Sundance, I didn't want it to stop. I shot for 4 days, but I really didn't want it to stop. It was just so much fun. And that's why, and I don't know if you've had this experience or not, if you meet someone that you worked with on a crew, especially if you're the director and they were working with you 10 years later, and you just find them somewhere, it's like no days have gone by. You're just like, oh, Bob, what's up? Oh my God. Exactly. Because you've gone through this kind of thing together that it's like cathartic. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I agree, because it's so intense that it burns it in your memory. It's like this thing that happened. You form these relationships and these bonds, even if it's like there's challenges or there's days that aren't as good. Like, you remember those almost in a positive light as the years go on. Yeah, you forget the stuff that was challenging, and it's just, it's like the same when I've gone on. Like, when I was younger, I went on this trip when I was like a teenager. It was kind of this organized trip, and I was on with these people that I'd never met before. And if I see one of them now, like 15 years later, I'll say it's the same thing. It's like I just saw them, because you go through this intense experience. And I think going back to what you said before, about like just the topic that we're on, I think it's great that we're getting into this. And I think it's so important, because I think so much online, and this applies even to like my website and so many other websites, like lots of filmmaking websites that I'm sure people visit that are great resources, but they don't always talk about like the actual realities of working in the business and like the sustaining that over a long term, which is like not always that responsible not to share. And I want to do a better job myself of sharing more of that, because, it's easy to tell people, as I often do, to just pick up your camera and make a movie. It's a lot harder to tell them that, like, this is going to be, could be very challenging, and that's okay. But like, that's just, I feel like it's an important conversation. So I appreciate that you bring it up and that you're, engaging on that, because you don't hear that often in the dialogue with indie film or micro budget film.
No, because it's not sexy. It's not.
Exactly.
It's much sexier to talk about the new camera that came out, or the new lens that came out, or how it's even sexier to talk about distribution. Like it's not real sexy to talk about like, oh, I just jacked up my back for a month because I'm carrying this thing because I'm completely out of shape, and I just and like now I'm literally on a couch for a month because I threw my back out really bad. Now I'm in therapy because of this film I made. That's not sexy, but it is reality. And that's what I try to do with Indie Film Hustle, is to kind of, show people the realities of the business. And you do such a great job on your site as well, to just tell people like, look, my mantra is always this: follow your dream, but don't be an idiot. And that is like my mantra on Filmmakers. Like, follow your dream. God bless. Go follow your dream. Yeah. But just don't be an idiot about it. Don't mortgage your house.
No, I mean, it's an incredible advice. And I don't think I'm sure I said this to you at some point offline, but like going back to the inception of this story and your mantra and your philosophy on everything, like that was really a huge help for me as a filmmaker, because it just so happened that, I had it in my mind, I don't know if it was like November or whatever of the year before I shot it. And then it wasn't until December that I really like committed to doing it. And in that window, I'd been listening to you a lot, and it really helped hearing your story and just your philosophy to kind of reinvigorate, because it felt like, I'd been saying that for a long time. I'd been feeling that for a long time, but like there weren't a lot of other voices that were kind of preaching that sort of stuff and doing it in a real way, where it's not just like, top 7 cameras to buy for your micro budget indie. It was like, you would really personalize your the lessons that you were sharing with people and your experiences. And like that really resonated with me, and I'm sure with many people. So I just want to, give you, props for that, because it was, definitely an important part of getting like committing to doing this film, so
I appreciate that, man. I try as much as I can. And I know I've actually been reached out by a lot of people from the tribe, that they said like, I was making my movie the same time you were making your first movie. And I was every day I would listen to you and your journey while I was making my movie. So I felt like we were making our movies together, even though we weren't literally making them together. And I've heard that happen with a lot of people who kind of go back to those early podcasts of me talking about Meg and how I made that little film. And, it's exciting, man. I just try to share as much as I possibly can, because I think there is a lack. I think you fit a really great hole, in the space as well, where there aren't a lot of people talking about the truth. There's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of, like you said, top 7 cameras to shoot your DSLRs, or what's the best way to, this or that. And there's an element of that kind of stuff on my site, but the majority of it is the truth. Like, and that's when I interview people like yourself or other guests, I go deep into like, so what were you feeling? Like anytime I have a Sundance winner on, I'm like, so what was it like when you got the call? Like, what was that time like? Like, I want to know, because I've never gotten the call myself.
No, well, and what I love about how you do that is, like, just to throw a reference in here, unrelated to filmmaking, but I'm a huge fan of Howard Stern's interviews. I don't know if you listen to him at all. He does the best celebrity interviews, and they're great because it's not just what's your project coming out like, what some fluffy stories. It's like, talking about the nitty gritty of like the emotional components of it, or the psychological components, or like the realities that like aren't always talked about, but are actually underlying impetus for things that happen or get made, or that are, it's just important. So again, I think you've done an amazing job, and that's so nice to hear that so many other filmmakers, unsurprisingly, have been inspired by what you're doing. And I know that's a gratifying feeling. I'll get that sometimes from my blog where, someone will say, hey, I made this film, and, it was because of this article or that podcast or whatever. And it's nice because, it's not just for nothing, it's not just about making a living doing it or whatever. It's like, that's the best part. So anyway, lots of that. And I get lots of compliments on your site from tons of people that read mine as well.
Thanks, man. It's and the other thing is, and I want everybody to hear this. I've said this a bunch of times, but I want everyone to hear this again. Is you have no idea what impact your work will do on other people in the world, whether that be a podcast, whether that be an article, or even more so your art. your actual films that you make, even if it's a little short film you put up on YouTube, you have no idea what that impact will have on a certain person at a certain time in their life. You always have to think that way when you make art, because I've watched things. I mean, look, we all read the book Rebel Without a Crew, like Robert Rodriguez's amazing book. That book, how many careers did that book launch? How many careers is that book still launching to this day? It's like one of those mythological texts in our business, especially for my generation when I was there at the time that it was happening. And you know, you've no idea the impact that those little 10-minute film schools he put on his DVDs did for me back in the day. Like, they're so huge. To him, he's just like, oh, I'm just going to do this and throw it out there. But you just don't know what it does to people. And I've realized that doing Indie Film Hustle over the years. But again, people watch certain movies and have an emotional attachment or an emotional cue from it that I never intended, but to them it makes sense. So it's really important what we do. And look, we're not solving. Look, we're not heroes. We're not, you know, fighting forest fires. We're not saving, saving people from cancer. But it is still important in the human condition, in the human experiment. In many ways.
And when you have any platform, whether it's like the movie you're making, whether it's a blog, whatever your podcast, like, you have a responsibility because people listen, they believe it, they buy into it, and you're like by default an authority on the topic. And you know, it comes with a lot of responsibility, even if it's a small audience. Like when I was starting my blog and I'd have, 100 people a month, like the first month or whatever, like it was just building, but I still felt like, that's still 100 people. That's still 100 human beings. Like, what if one of them takes what I say the wrong way and does something stupid? Like, I always had that in my head. I feel like you certainly do as well with your content. So I think it's important. It definitely transcends, as you said, to just the movies you're making, the stories, the themes, the messages that are in your film. Like, it's amazing how much, and it's inspiring now how much these like smaller micro budget films even that like, they may not get a big theatrical release. They may not show in the Dome in Hollywood, but someone may see it and it may like save their life. Like, it may, not to like glorify, but there may be something that you touch on that really resonates with somebody, and it may help them, so so I couldn't agree more.
So let's talk a little bit about distribution. The very sexy topic of distribution. So you decided to self-distribute your film. Can you tell us why you did and what's your experience with it so far?
Distribution for us was something from the very beginning we thought about doing and wanting to go down the self-distribution path, specifically just because it was such an experiment. This movie, as we already talked about, it was like no budget, very small crew. And it was just this idea of like, can we do this thing where we make it fully in-house and distribute it? And even though it's going to be a small project, a small distribution, if it's all in-house, like, is there some sort of financial model where that actually makes sense, where you can make a movie for $10,000, $12,000 and actually turn a profit with it? And the only way that I felt like that made any sense was through self-distribution. With that said, a few months into the process, more than a few months, once we were done editing, I got a couple of offers from distributors, and we got a lot more later once we started doing like festival stuff. But we had a couple right off the bat. One of which was really enticing. It was a distributor that essentially wanted to retro finance the film. So they would have technically then become a producer on the project. They would have just paid everything. They would have reimbursed me for everything I paid. And then they would have essentially come on board as an equal partner. And that's something I hadn't really heard of. And I thought, you know what,
it's rare, but it happens.
Exactly. And for me, I was like, okay, I hear all these stories about people making $10,000 movies and it's flushed down the toilet. If we get anything, we're lucky. At the same time, it was so early and we hadn't premiered yet or anything. So I kind of put a pin in that. We ended up premiering here in LA at Dances with Films, which is awesome. They got, I guess they have a lot of distributors on their radar, because once we got in, like before we even premiered it, we started getting emails from all these distributors. And I wrote, again, another article on this on my website. There's about 40 of them in total that we engaged with, either sales agents or distributors. And I went through one by one and vetted them and spoke to a lot of them on the phone or just, had meetings or whatever. And it was just so clear that that was not right for this movie. And it wasn't just a financial thing, but that was a big part of it. For anyone listening that hasn't gone down that path, most distribution companies are on this level are not, I don't want to say they're not legitimate, but they're not, the deck is sort of stacked in their favor. You might get a deal or an offer where they'll distribute your film, but it's really being packaged with a bunch of other films. It could get held up, going from film market to film market for, who knows how long. Maybe it'll get sold. Maybe it won't. Maybe someone will see it. Maybe they and it's such a gamble. And even the best case scenario is that you're going to make, a small amount of money back unless you have name actors or if you have some festival prestige, you premiered at Sundance or something. But for the most part, at least the distributors I spoke with, and again, some of them are quite reputable. The deals just it wasn't enticing. It wasn't anything where
What are some of the deals? I mean, to interrupt you, but what are some of the deals that you can say, percentages and caps and all that kind of stuff, so people understand what these deals are like?
So I think standard when it comes to percentage is usually around anywhere from 25 to 35% is kind of the standard, depending on how involved they are and what the marketing is going to look like and all of that. And honestly, upfront, usually what I would be looking for if I'm not sold on the fact that they're going to really be able to get this to market or get this into the world in the next 6 months, year, what I'm looking for is some sort of minimum guarantee. I don't expect the world. I know what the film is. I know it's low budget and there's no stars. But if someone came along and offered us a distribution deal where they were going to take 30% and they were going to give us an MG up front that would cover a good chunk of our budget, whether it's, $7,000, $8,000, something like that. And I liked working with them, I would certainly consider it, but we didn't have that right combination. We had some people offering us money, but they didn't have a good track record. We had other people offering us no money, but they had a pretty good track record. But it just didn't feel thematically like the film would be necessarily a good fit for them. So at the end of the day, I'm crunching the numbers, and I've had a lot of experience marketing things online, selling products through my website. I understand on a basic level e-commerce, and my gut feeling was just this is if any film is going to be self-distributed, right, it's this film. And that's exactly what we did. We went through distributors. I know you did with your film. We had it was such an easy process, other than actually giving them the film and the artwork, which is already made. All we needed were closed captions. We got those through rev.com. Sure. Which is crazy how that system works. It's a whole other conversation. And then, now it's getting into, so we did pre-orders. I'm not sure if you want to jump ahead there yet, but that's something. So I think that's something really important to understand. It's something that I've learned from other people in the business, as far as how pre-orders can really boost your sales on day one. And the goal is that basically all your pre-orders convert to a sale on day one. So if you have 30-day window and every day, you get 10 people, and that becomes 300, you get 300 pre-orders on day one. It looks to iTunes, from what I'm told, 300 people bought your movie that day. That helps shoot it up in the rankings. Right. And so that was the strategy. And I didn't use any paid ads. I didn't, I used basically the resources I had, which are my blog, some of my cast, the lead actress helped. She has a bit of a following for some music stuff she's doing. So we promoted it the best we could. We got a bunch of pre-orders. We hit the top, within 2 days, we were on the top pre-order list, relatively high up. I went on there, honestly, 2 days into it, just to see who was on, they have on iTunes, the top pre-order category. I thought, okay, I'm not going to see the movie on here. No way yet. But let's just see. And then sure enough, I'm going through, and a movie I just saw, Blaze, with Ethan Hawke, or that he directed, which was awesome, was on there. And we were above. We were ranking before that, and it didn't stay like that for the whole time, but it was like that for a week. And that was the first point when I realized it actually, the playing field really is leveled once you're dealing with iTunes. You still, you're still up against a big competition when you're looking at like studio features and all of that with all this marketing dollars, but you can compete. Like you can compete in certain categories. And one thing that I haven't done yet, but we plan to do, it's just been a challenge because the other feature is just demanding so much of my time right now, is we're working on cutting trailers specific for Facebook. So we're going to cut these square trailers, and they're going to have captions, and they're going to be like 15 to 30 seconds. And we're going to market them to people that are interested in similar films to ours, but that are also interested in like things like Kickstarter or Seed and Spark or Vimeo, or like just people that might be into that indie film world, whether they're a filmmaker or not. And we're going to use Facebook ads to target them. And I'm going to use a lot of what I've learned from Facebook ads in the past, just from other products I've sold and all that, to apply to that. In an ideal world, that would have rolled out like day one. Like we launched, we're on iTunes, and that rolled out. That was actually my plan. It didn't work out that way because my timeline just went absolutely haywire on my new project. But that's the strategy. And so far, we're recouping the budget. I'm checking, Distributor every day. There's more sales, there's more rentals, and it's really an amazing feeling to know that we just have control over what's happening. So it's been really great so far. And in the future, we're going to obviously open up the door for other platforms. So typically, and I'm sure you've talked about this in other episodes, but for anyone that's not as familiar with windowing, I mean, obviously with a theatrical film, you window the film in the theater and then, wait a couple months and then it's released on DVD or whatever. With digital, you can do your own windowing strategy. So you always want to do iTunes first, or transactional VOD, whether it's iTunes. I guess Amazon has their own version. They also have like the other subscription platform as well. But then you go to like subscription, and then which is Hulu or whatever, and then you can go to like ad based, which is also
AVOD is another big way of making money now.
Exactly. And some of those platforms are actually really good.
I know people making $4 or $5 grand a month off of AVOD. Yeah,
because there's not the same movies on there. So like on Netflix or something, you're competing with whatever Adam Sandler movie they made that month. Right. But you're on like, a Tubi TV or one of these platforms that like you maybe never heard of, but people are actually on there renting movies, and there's not as much competition. So anyway, you kind of want to window it so you're going from like transactional to SVOD to AVOD, exactly. As I don't have to tell you, but yeah. So that's kind of where we're at with it right now, nice. And it's exciting just to see it all finished. This is the first time I've taken it to that point, so it's definitely a nice experience. Now
I've spoken a lot about self-distribution. I'm a big proponent of self-distribution, but I also want people to understand that it is not for everybody and for every film. For a micro budget like yours and like my films, it makes sense. And we also have an audience. We have a platform. We're savvy about marketing. We're savvy about how, to sell products online. So it makes sense for, look, if you came to me, Alex, what should I do? I'm like, dude, you should self-distribute. It makes, unless you get some sick deal, it makes all the sense in the world. But if you have a movie that costs you $300,000, self-distribution is a much tougher sell.
Yeah, I think the only situation where that can work is when you have some sort of, if there's no stars in it or anything, if you have some wind in your sails as far as a built-in fan base, if it's let's say on a topic or it wins, a top prize at Berlin or something, there's some, and at that point you're getting offers anyway. But when you already have this like huge momentum and you have a way to ride that,
it works.
I that's the only time it can work. But otherwise, I totally agree with you because, you spend all this money and you're not, I mean, the thing is, if me or you makes a movie for 10 grand and we make 50 grand on it, like that's
we're good. We're fantastic.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. I'll do it. Like, let's rinse and repeat that 4 or 5 times a year. We're in good shape.
Yeah, exactly. Because in theory, with the right script, you're shooting something in a week or 2 weeks or less, and
post is about a month. Yeah,
posting it in a month, and you could do a couple of those a year. You could be making, in theory, with the right marketing strategy, with the right topics, with a good trailer, understanding how to market. If you're really savvy savvy with that, you can make a living. And I'm at the very, very beginning of that experiment, but I'm seeing it already start to pay off. I'm literally seeing the money come in, and I'm not getting rich with them. Certainly making a lot more of my income from my traditional revenue streams with my commercial production, all that. But understanding how that works is so important to me right now, so I can scale it up, so I can apply it to other projects. And I do think there's a breaking point where you can scale it up so far, but at a certain point, at least right now, it doesn't make sense. If your budget's too high, you need someone to come in and just say, okay, you made that film for $500,000. Great. We're going to buy it for $1 million, and they cut you a check. I mean, that's the dream for sure. But yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing about these little films, these $10,000, $20,000 movies, is like, you can make some money with them, and if you know what you're doing. It's just not everyone wants to put in the work as a marketer, which is the big question.
It's a dirty word, but it's a word that we all need to understand, without question. Now, can you tell me a little bit quickly about your film, your new film?
Yes, the new film. Yes. So the new film I'm super excited about is called White Crow. It's about a woman who gets a heart transplant, and then she starts taking on the characteristics of her heart donor. So it's based on this very real thing, and some people would call it real, some not, but it's called cellular memory, and it happens when people get a new organ, and there's like certain side effects that sort of they experience as a result of the surgery, and as a result of feeling this sort of bizarre connection almost to the other person. So it started as like that idea. It turned into a genre film. It's not, I wouldn't call it a horror film. It's kind of like a creeper, like it's a slow burn kind of psychological thriller with maybe some hints of horror. And it's all about this woman realizing the person she's sort of becoming mentally and psychologically in her personality is maybe not a great person. And she develops this relationship with her widow. And it's just such, I think it's so fascinating.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah. It's really, really, I mean, we've had a lot of people read it and give us great feedback. It's been something I've like toiled over for a year basically on the script, which I've never done. And yeah, so we did funding. I'm funding most of it myself. We did a crowdfunding on Seed and Spark. We raised like just under 15K, which was a nice like extra boost for us. And then we also got, I was telling you offline, but we got to pitch to the Duplass brothers. So they sent them this script. They put a little bit of money as like a grant basically into the movie, which is just like such a great confidence boost for all of us. We're super grateful for that. And now we're getting ready to shoot. We're shooting in 2 weeks, shooting on, yeah, it's crazy. It's been in the work. This one's not as crazy as the last. So in terms of I learned my lesson. So we got 2 locations. They're both booked. We have permission for both. We're not breaking into any houses.
Oh, what's the fun? I mean, come on.
Well,
we have a couple. Look, Hitchcock stole shots. Like he was on studio movies. He would just grab a camera and run down the street and shoot some stuff.
Oh, trust me. No, you're preaching to the choir. We've got a few of those in there, but most of it we're going to be legit for. And yeah, we've got a bigger crew. We're shooting Alexa. Like it's going to be treated more like a full production, but it's kind of in between like what I did last time and what you might see on like your average $250,000, $500,000 like indie film. So it's going to be nice to have like a bit more of a infrastructure. So anyway, I'm doing lots of that. If anyone wants to see it, I know I listen to your podcast, so I know you do your plugs sometimes at the end, but I'll mention. So we're on. And there's not a ton on there yet, but we're going to be rolling out loads of behind the scenes content on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's just White Crow Movie. So there's a lot coming on that front if anyone wants to follow along.
Cool.
Yep.
And now I'm gonna shoot you the questions I ask every guest. I think you might know these questions at this point.
I do. I didn't think to prepare them though, but go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
What advice would you give a filmmaker wanting to break into the business today?
Let me think about that, because the first thing that comes to mind is what everybody would say, which is just go and make your own movies. The longer answer to that, I think, is understand story and understand character, because I think a lot of filmmakers, and I fell into this boat, like it's so easy to get wrapped up in the gear. And it's so easy to think if you get the right camera, you're going to be a professional. But the hard part that just there's no getting around, there's no way you can buy yourself out of it, is like read a lot of scripts, understand writing, even if you don't want to be a screenwriter, like understand what it takes to tell a good story, because that's something that you can't buy and that you can't learn other than just doing it. So and you don't need to that doesn't have to cost you any money, to spend time writing or reading scripts. But for me, been the most beneficial thing. So hopefully that resonates with somebody.
Can you tell me what book had the biggest impact on your life or career?
Yes, I think, the biggest book that I'm going to say two. So, I have to say Mariachi, because that just blew me away.
Rebel Without a Crew. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, for sure. As far as honestly business is concerned, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the best book I've ever read.
Great book. Great book.
That book literally changed my life. And to sum it up for people in one sentence, it's basically all about how you understand how you make a living, and how a lot of us think about making a living based on essentially trading our time for money and, just getting paycheck. And that's how we make our income. And this book's all about like, how do you create valuable assets that will pay you so you can eventually make passive income and have free time to do things like make movies. So, I mean, it's the furthest thing from a film book, but it literally changed my life from the day I read it on. So I have to mention it on
Great
that question.
Book. Great book. Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
I think it's honestly in the film industry, I don't know if it took me the longest to learn, but the most important, and probably it took me a long time, was how to really be collaborative in the truest sense. And I think I learned this a lot when I was writing my script this year. This is by far the script I'm most proud of. It's also the one I was open most to notes on. I sent it to so many people, got so much feedback. I wasn't offended at the feedback. I wasn't sensitive. It was like, these are people that might watch the movie. Don't screw it up by the time they actually can. Like, don't screw it up on set, screw it up now and learn from those mistakes and be collaborative. Other people have other things to offer. And as the director, your job is, in my opinion, is you're the filter. As the writer, you're the filter. You take the good ideas that make sense for that story. But if there's a good idea coming from your PA or coming from, whoever, it doesn't matter. Be open and receptive to it. Cause I think without good collaboration, you don't have anything really. So, yeah.
And what are three of your favorite films of all time?
Oh God, I hate this question.
Whatever comes to mind.
Okay, so I'll say this is a recent favorite film, but it's been a huge inspiration for my movie right now, which is Persona by Ingmar Bergman.
Okay.
I absolutely love that movie. I'll give you my three favorite films like I've seen this year. So that's one of them. And not recent movies necessarily. The other one would be A Woman Under the Influence, John Cassavetes.
Of course.
It's just like, it's just such, oh my God.
Raw.
I can't,
it's a raw nerve. Yeah. It's a raw nerve is what it is.
It really, really is. And my dog's barking, so I guess I got to speak to the third one. The third one would probably be something by Aronofsky, maybe The Wrestler. That movie is just so raw and simple and pure, and it just blows my mind. I could watch that movie every day, and there's very few movies. I'm not into wrestling. I'm not into.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? It's just like it's a masterpiece, I think. So those would be my three right now, and that'll change tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, where can people find you and the work you do?
So my main blog is sort of my hub for everything. So Noam Kroll, NoamKroll.com. That's got all my stuff is sort of on there. I've got a podcast, which you've been on, which people should listen to that. Everyone tells me how much they love that episode. It's Show Don't Tell on iTunes. And then, like I said, White Crow Movie is the handle on all social media. So,
and the name of the movie we're discussing is
Shadows on the Road, which I should also promote as well. I'm promoting everything but that right now. So that's on iTunes if anyone wants to watch that. Look up Shadows on the Road. At some point, we're going to be doing like Vimeo on demand and some other platforms for people that aren't in the US or Canada, because that's only where it is right now. But yeah, Shadows on the Road. You can see the trailer on my website and on Vimeo and stuff if you Google it. So yeah, I think that covers it.
Man, Noam, thank you so much for being on the show. I'll put all those links in the show notes, guys. Thanks again for being on it. It is a pleasure talking to a fellow indie film hustler, because you are an indie film hustler without question, man. So thanks again for being on the show, brother. Thanks for dropping the bombs.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. I appreciate it.
I want to thank Noam again for coming on the show and really sharing his experiences and his knowledge with the tribe. Thank you again, Noam. If you want to get links to anything we talked about in this episode, head over to filmtrepreneur.com/044 for the show notes. Thank you for listening, guys. As always, be a filmtrepreneur. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Filmtrepreneur podcast at filmtrepreneur.com.